I've read 80 books this year, which is a number I'm really happy with, and it has been a spectacular year of reading for me. I found a whole bunch of books which are gonna go right up there in my all-time favorites. So that's what I've done. I've picked out the ones that really stood out a notch above the rest, and there's a pretty wide range of genres I read. Some wartime historical fiction, some horror, but mostly epic fantasy, which has been, my favorite genre forever. So then these 14 books, I know 14 is a weird number, it's not the standard 10. I hope you forgive me, I could not boil it down anymore. I also didn't set any rules on myself. So, you have the same author showing up, you have the same books from the same series showing up again. That just felt like the more appropriate way to do it, but either way, I wanted to get into these. So, number 14, we start with All Quiet on the Western Front. This is a classic, set during World War One, written in 1929. We follow a German boy named Paul and basically his company of soldiers from the start to the end of the war. This book left such an impact on me. It was powerful, gorgeous writing, but also just so impactful. And even now when I think about it, I get teary-eyed. When I read it, I cried, and then I felt like a husk of a human being for a few days afterwards. This is not a happy story, right? There's not much humor in there. It's not a feel-good story. It's tragic and it's heartbreaking, but it has this authenticity, which is just, you cannot replicate that, right? Because no one is left to write these books anymore. And it's such a real account of what it was like, or what it must have been like being a soldier in that war. And it's heartbreaking. It really is. But it leaves such a powerful impact that I think everyone should read it. It's a very short book, so it's easy to get through in that sense. But it will definitely change your life, or at least it did for me. So that was number 14, All Quiet on the Western Front. Number 13 was Asunder by Kirsten Hall. You may not have heard of this book because I don't think it's the most popular. So I'm gonna try to set the stage for what's going on with it. So we follow a woman named Karis, and she is in this world with what you call a death speaker. And what that means is that when she was younger, she made a pact with this demon creature thing named Sebaster, where essentially he gave her the power to be able to talk to people after they've died. In exchange, her life basically belongs to him. So at any point he wants, he can come and claim her, and she's just gonna be a slave. So why would she make that pact? Essentially, she was broke, right? She had no money and she was desperate. And by becoming a death speaker, she can find work, because in this world, if you can talk to people after they've died, then you can learn how they died. So people will hire her and tell her, okay, go there's some people that died, find out what happened to them. So she can go there, she can do that. And essentially, that's how the book starts, is she's on a job and everything goes awry. Some crazy things happen. She ends up running into a man who's dying, and she uses this magic to bind his shadow to her own. And from there, that's where the plot takes off. So these two, they end up on the run. They're trying to survive while they're also trying to figure out how to separate. This is a story about someone who's really been hurt, and they're broken, and they're finding their way to open up and trust again. It's a really well balanced book. It's just so atmospherically written. The world building is exquisite and rich and very complete. It's got a very driving plot. The pacing was spectacular. It never felt like it stalled at any point. It's got a compelling cast of characters. We have a found family in here. And then at the heart of the story, and what it's really about, is a slow burn romance, which I thought was immaculately done. I think Asunder is just a brilliant book, and I hope that more people read it so that we can get book 2 to come soon. Number 12 for me was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. It's likely, if you watch a lot of BookTube, you've heard of this book, and most likely everyone that talks about it will tell you, I don't want to talk too much about it because it'll ruin the mystery, and I'm going to be another one of those people. I'm sorry, because I really think going into Piranesi blind is the way to do it. Talk about atmosphere and mystery. Beautiful, simple, elegant writing, and probably the most endearing main character I've ever read. This is a story about the surreal. It's about memory and identity and just the raw nature of the human spirit. One that's uncorrupted by modernity. I think Piranesi also has one of the most well-performed audio narrations I've ever heard. So definitely I would check it out on audio. Read Piranesi. It's short. You won't regret it. Alright, number 11 was City of Thieves by David Benioff. This is wartime historical fiction. Winter 1942. The siege of Leningrad. Desperate, despondent, starvation everywhere, buildings being shelled. Like, it's just a horrible situation, and the atmosphere comes through this book so well. But at the same time, it's got this strong sense of levity and humor. The plot is about two young Russian boys, I should say, and they end up meeting in very interesting situation. And they are given a task by the leader of the NKVD, which is like the secret Russian police. And he basically tells them, if you want to live, go out into the city and find me a box of a dozen eggs, because he wants to bake a birthday cake for his daughter. And even there, you can see like just the basic plot is very kind of humorful, right? And that's like the vibe of the story is, even though there's so much desperation and darkness, just there's also a lot of levity and just this like the spirit of people in these situations. This is a coming of age story, you know, and these characters are just so vivid. They have amazing dialogue with one another. There's genuine tension. I came to care so much about them. I love the way they interacted, and there were proper tear-jerking moments. This is short as well, and an exceptional read. Definitely check out City of Thieves by David Benioff. Okay, and now we're into the top 10. So number 10, which is one of the few books I have physically, is Assassin's Fate. This is the ending to one of my favorite series of all time, and we're talking a 16-book series, Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. I had my fair share of issues with the final trilogy in Realm of the Elderlings. In fact, I actually have a controversial take, I think, in that the final trilogy is probably my second least favorite in the whole series. Despite that, just bringing everything to an end was such a profound and impactful experience for me. You know, like these characters who I was so invested in over the course of this series, the way their stories ended, you know, it brought me to tears. It really did. And this book, it really is a tour de force of the entire series. Like, we bring everything together in Realm of the Elderlings in such a great way, right? Like it was an amazing way to say goodbye to the story, which has meant so much to me. So even though it's not my favorite in the Realm of the Elderlings, I still think Assassin's Fate was a hell of an ending. And if you are thinking about getting into Robin Hobb, I say you gotta do it. And if you do it, then be confident that there is a strong ending at the end of it. All right, so we are going to move on to number 9, which is Enemy of God by Bernard Cornwell. If you are not familiar with the Warlord Chronicles, this is Bernard Cornwell's Arthurian retelling, where essentially we are told a story from the perspective, it's a framing narrative told from the perspective of one of Arthur's knights called Durfal. Book 2, Enemy of God, I think is most people's favorite. It's got this incredible emotional gut punch moments in this, but Bernard Cornwell's writing in general just had the sense of melancholy for, you know, like the loss from the framing narrative perspective, and at the same time it's just masterfully done character work. I loved Enemy of God because we saw how much Durfal had changed from the Winter King, and it was this subtle manipulation in his character where you just stop and think like, wow, bro, you've actually grown up. And I love the series from like the first line of the Winter King, which is book 1, but book 2 took everything up a notch. And like I said, just amazing battle sequences and a gut-wrenching ending, and just so well done. I love the Warlord Chronicles. If you haven't read that one, go for it. Okay, number 8 was Shogun by James Clavell. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of this one. I'm sure a lot of people have seen the TV show. Let me tell you, I watched the TV show as well, but the book was really just next level, and I read the book before the TV show. So if you're unfamiliar with Shogun follows a man named John Blackthorne. So this is the 1600s, and John Blackthorne is an English sailor that gets stranded on Japan. So it really is a stranger in a strange land kind of thing. And if you've seen this book, it's this giant epic, like chonker. So I expected that going into it, that this would be like a grand epic tale with insane battles and all that stuff. But what I actually got was really intimate story with like a few characters and their relationships. It's a story of power, ambition, political intrigue, loyalty, betrayal, honor and duty, survival and faith, and love and sacrifice. There is so much packed into this book. But at the same time, my memories of it are cozy. You know, just this time spent with Blackthorne and Mariko and Toranaga, and just like the antics that they're getting up to in Japan. It was such a wonderful book, and it's also got a brilliant audio. Like if you read Shogun, I definitely recommend the audio narration. I think Shogun is a classic. It must be a classic by now, but it's definitely worthy of that status. All right, so number 7 was Lord of Emperors by Guy Gabriel Kay. This is book 2 in the Sarantine Mosaic, which is a historical fantasy based on the Byzantine Empire and the court of Justinian. On the surface, this is a story about a man named Crispin who is a mosaicist, so he makes mosaics, and he's basically tasked by the emperor of Sarantium to create a masterpiece. So he travels there in book 1, and this is the story that happens in the city. But even though that's what it is on the surface, it's actually a book with so much depth. The city of Sarantium felt so vivid and real, and one of the reasons is because we get a lot of POVs from a lot of different characters. There's a lot of political intrigue in this story, and it's a story about art and legacy, about faith and the loss of faith, of the struggle between faith and art, about power and its consequences, about the fragility of empire, because that's what we're seeing is this empire at its peak, and what happens when you're at the peak, there's a decline that follows. And it's a story about how time is the ultimate winner. This is a thematically rich book. It's written beautifully, and yet even despite the thematic richness and the gorgeous writing, it really is a deeply human and intimate story. I buddy read this with my friends Ben and Nico, and it was such a blast. We really got deep into the books in our conversations, and yeah, it was such a surreal experience. Like I've read 3 GGK books now. Each one of them was a hit, and one of the most exciting things for me is that I have a whole bibliography of this amazing author to look forward to next year and in the coming years. The only issue is now I want to savor it a little bit as well. So that was number 7, Lord of Emperors by GGK. For number 6, we go back to the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell with Excalibur. I don't think most people have the book 3 as their favorite, but I do. By this point in the story, it was just, I felt so invested in the characters, and we had this amazing character growth for Durfel and Kynwyn, and the romance that was there. Arthur, they just felt like family in a way. And at the same time, we had a plot that just really ramped up in Excalibur, where we had the conflict between the Britons and the Saxons. This book contains the best battle scene I've ever read. The sense of tension and investment I had in the story by this point was immense. The framing narrative was just so full of emotion and melancholy, and the audio performance in the Warlord Chronicles is second to none. It's just spectacular. I cried at the end of Excalibur. It was that good. I love this trilogy. All right, and now we are into the top 5. So number 5 is A Brightness Long Ago by Guy Gabriel Kay, the first GGK book I read, and this one was inspired by 15th century Italy. It's hard for me to pin down the premise of A Brightness Long Ago, because there's just something about this book which has this magical quality, and it's like I couldn't even tell you what the plot is, and yet I have never felt so deeply immersed in this story. It was a story about the fragility of life and the beauty of life, about these moments of connection between different human beings and how they impact others and how they change us and how they stay with us. And then the inevitability of loss, and the fleeting nature of time and joy, how joy is more beautiful because it is fleeting. This is lyrically written, just some of the most beautiful prose I've ever read, even though it's not complicated. It's very simple and straightforward. And there was this experimental style to the writing, which just enamored me. Like I was always wondering, like, wow, GGK, like I would not have the guts to do that as an author, but you pulled it off so well with these crazy POV and tense changes that he did. This is like an author's. This is like an author's favorite book kind of book. You know what I mean? Like, I bet your favorite author loves this book. A Brightness Long Ago, if I had to pick the most gorgeous book I've read, if I had to just use the word gorgeous to describe a book, this would be it, right? And again, like I said, it's got this magical quality, which like I can't even quite put my finger on it, on what made it so special. But I hope I kind of got the idea across to like what an experience it was reading A Brightness Long Ago. Okay, number 4, we have The Lies of Lamora by Scott Lynch. If you ask me, from an objective perspective, this has to be one of the most complete and perfect fantasy novels of this century. You have incredible character works. You have a driving plot full of twists and crazy turns, immaculate, vivid, rich world building, without a single wasted word, not a single wasted scene. Stunningly unique, compelling prose, the wit, the banter. It's just insane. This is a genuine masterpiece. Everyone talks about the amazing characters, right? And the relationships and the dialogue. And I agree, it is beyond amazing. However, you have to add on to that just how good this book is in every other way. Like, Kamor is maybe one of the most vivid settings I've ever read. This, like, even though this book is so popular, I still think it's underrated because that's how good it is. The Lies of Lamora is a true masterpiece, and I was blown away when I read it. Number 3 for me was a bit of a surprise, and that is Blackwater by Michael McDowell. So this is actually a horror novel, but if you don't know anything about it, let me set the stage. We're talking 1927, small town, Alabama. You have the town of Perdido, and it's been flooded by the Blackwater River. In this town right now, we have Oscar Kasky, who is the son of the richest family in town, and he's rowing his boat through town, just seeing the damage. And he's got a servant with him. He rows up to the local hotel, and he goes to the window. The rooms inside are completely flooded. He looks through the window, and in that flooded room, there's a woman, and she's just sitting on the bed. And he's like, hi, who are you? And she's like, hey, how's it going? And that's where the story starts. So this is a story which, even though it's a horror novel and it's got some horror elements which are really intense and add a lot of tension to it, this truly is a Southern Gothic family drama. A family drama which spans 50 years following this richest family of the town, the Kaskys. The character work in this book is incredible because you see the characters from their youth. You see how their parents influence them. You see how that influences their children, and you have this gigantic cast with a bunch of very unique. Like, every single voice is unique and compelling. It is maybe some of the best character work I've ever read. And it really is, like, the story is about the dramas and the internal politics of this family. It's about the internal struggles for power and attention, and like how some like the mother-in-law versus the daughter-in-law and stuff like that. And it's just masterfully done. The changes in the characters over time. You see how real-time historical moments impact this family and the town. Stuff like the Great Depression, like World War II. You see how the town evolves and changes. You see how the fortunes of the Kaskys evolve and change over time. There are themes of man versus nature and the weight of history. And again, like, that influence that our elders and our parents leave in us, like the generational trauma that carries through. Blackwater is an absolute masterpiece. It's also one of the best audio narrations I've ever heard. If you are a fantasy reader and you're thinking about dipping your toes into horror, I think Blackwater is such a great place to start. It really isn't. It's not scary at all. It's one of the best character-driven stories I've ever read. All right, and we're on to number 2. Number 2 for me was Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch. I think on the surface, compared to book 1, the plot of Red Seas Under Red Skies was a little bit less wild. There weren't as many crazy twists and turns. You could potentially maybe poke some holes in it, but I think we make up for that with a much deeper dive into these characters. Like, this is the story of the bromance between Locke and Jean, right? And this is maybe one of the most compelling relationships I've ever read in fantasy. It's not just about friendship at the surface level. It's about everything that friendship entails. It's about the loss and the hurt that can come with that, but about the loyalty and that you feel for your true friends, like the people who you have their backs to hell and winter. Like, it's so well done, the relationships in this book. And then, despite what I said about the plot, it's still an excellent plot, and we meet all these amazing new characters. You have piracy, you have like just laugh out loud humor, swashbuckling adventure, genuine heartbreak. Like, there were moments in this book where I was completely gutted, and I loved every moment of the Gentleman Masters trilogy. But I think this is the one that's really stuck with me, and this is the one with the moments which I still remember and think about all the time. Number 2 was Red Seas Under Red Skies. And finally, we're at my favorite read of the year 2024. And the funny thing is, this is actually the first book I read this year, and that is Fool's Assassin by Robin Hobb. What can I even say about this? Every time I've started a Robin Hobb trilogy, it's felt like coming home. And Fool's Assassin, it had that same cozy vibe which she often starts her books with, and that's my favorite Robin Hobb. It's a slice of life where you're just spending time with Fitz and the crew and just day-to-day stuff. And I don't know why, but like the way she writes it just makes it so compelling. There are themes. One of my favorite themes throughout the 16 books was fatherhood, and the way that Fitz's father figures affected him, and the way all of that culminates in this book, in Fool's Assassin, was just spectacular. Like, it was so touching, it was gut-wrenching, it was so, like, just amazingly well done. This book has such a rich atmosphere. Like, just, it was so atmospheric, and at the same time there was this looming sense of dread, which culminated in this whirlwind of an ending. And it was a perfect way to kick off the final trilogy. Fool's Assassin is, I think, one of the best books in Realm of the Elderlings. It's one of my favorite books of all time, and it's one that I still think about all the time. And it has stuck with me in a way that very few other books do. My favorite book of 2024. What was yours? What did you think of my list? Did you agree or disagree with any of my picks? And how was your year of reading? What kind of amazing books did you read this year? Other than that, please drop that down in the comments below. And I hope that you guys have an amazing holiday season. And here's to an incredible year of reading come 2025. Thank you so much for watching.